As you expressed, the autistic community is such an amazing community with photobiomodulation and applying the nutrients so that, okay, maybe we're bringing the blood flow, but are we bringing the nutrients associated with that blood flow to optimize and sustain those cellular membranes to keep them firing at this so that you don't have to keep going back and reinventing the wheel. We're actually changing the cells and improving their function.
I had a bleeding ulcer at 13, 14 years old, kind of hereditary, lost 50% of the blood in my body. And kind of over one of the weekends of seeing a doctor on a Friday, and then over the weekend, very ill, they found me on Monday morning, school time, and I was bleeding out in the bathroom.
Welcome to The Third Opinion, presented by Full Circle Health. Join us each week as we delve into the world of integrative and functional medicine through discussions, interviews, lecture series, and more. Our experts have been on both sides of the Western medical system and understand the frustrations associated with getting real answers about all of the available treatment options. Well, we are here to give you the answers. We'll take the time to break down the latest holistic and integrative medical procedures, supplements, and discoveries to help you better understand your body on a molecular level. Please keep in mind, this podcast was created for educational purposes only and should never be used to take place of a medical diagnosis or treatment. As always, make sure to take the time to submit any questions or comments you may have about today's show so we can give you the answers you need. Now, let's get healthy.
Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Adelena Izold with The Third Opinion podcast. And today I have a featured guest, Daniel Lyons, here to talk about his liposomal formulations and topicals. And we are going to be diving in all about really what led you to starting this amazing company and amazing formulas that I think need to be more vastly utilized amongst our patients, because everybody is getting supplement overload. Isn't that the case, right? Everybody is sick of swallowing pills. And, unfortunately, we're very much so aware that our digestive systems are compromised. So if you're, sick of swallowing a bunch of supplements and are looking for other, maybe, more readily absorbed, but better quality formulas, then Daniel Lyons has the info for us. How you doing today, Daniel?
I'm doing great. No, I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk to you, and really excited about Full Circle Health and The Third Opinion really having this opportunity for these podcasts, because it's really intriguing to talk to all these different people that are in functional wellness. What do we do? How do we contribute? And that's really what's neat for me. And I hope we can continue to do other things. There's so much to talk about in terms of supplementation in the industry. It's a huge industry.
I know.
And I'm really excited about what we bring for clinicians, for functional practitioners, for all the people. I'm a formulator, and one of the unique aspects of being a formulator, not a doctor, my background is in chemical processing and engineering, chemical process engineering specifically, for that functionality, all my life doing that, traveling around the world, working with so many different aspects of how to chemically help, specifically in wastewater facilities. Kind of interested me all over Thailand, palm oil production, sugar beet production. So a lot of the aspects of food production and water, and trying to basically, how do they eliminate the toxins that are in their waste stream? So it's a really unique approach. I traveled all over the world with that. And then how I got drawn into this is so exciting. But I'm excited because talking to functional doctors, it's really, how can we utilize these topical creams? And what's unique, I think, about my background, I'll just say off the top, is that I make creams for doctors, by doctors. And so the approach and how I got about that in the beginning of those stories is intriguing. So it's a saga. It's an interesting saga.
You always have all the interesting info. And I mean, realistically, Daniel, I think it's so amazing, having had that background, you ultimately saw there's a gap in the supplement industry. There's aspects that maybe are being overlooked, or other other means to get a lot of these resources. And as you have always been such an eloquent guest on our radio, I think that's what makes it so different for us to be on this podcast, but also we get to see each other and do this. This is just very cool as well. So, and I wanted to celebrate, Daniel is going to be celebrating, I believe you had stated you're going to be 71, or you're currently 71 years old.
71 in April, yes.
And can we just all take a look? I mean, he looks younger than me, okay? And a lot of this is a testament to, practicing what you preach and utilizing these formulas. And so I know, as you said, there's so much we can dive in and talk about. Today, we're going to be mostly just doing an intro for many of our listeners, learning a little bit about what are topical creams, like how is this different than other things maybe we're seeing. But even in future, we got to dive into these formulas, because I think that there's so much information on maybe the nutrients that we're stating, but patients might not be as aware in how much more readily absorbed so many of these formulas are. So I love to hear, basically about your background. But when we talk about, let's say, that, what would be like the biggest issue that you see with the traditional supplement kind of manufacturing, since that's realistically your background?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And that is the basis of how I began this. I myself suffer from metabolic syndrome, always have as a child. I had a bleeding ulcer at 13, 14 years old, kind of hereditary, lost 50% of the blood in my body. I'm colorblind also. So my mother had taken me at this time of that age, tender age, to a doctor, and he thought I had the flu. But in the process, I was actually internally bleeding. And because I couldn't, determine at the young age the difference between it coming out of both ends and what was going on, I thought it was just, vomit like the flu.
Yeah.
But I was actually internally bleeding. And kind of over one of the weekends of seeing a doctor on a Friday, and then over the weekend, very ill, they found me on Monday morning, school time, and I was bleeding out in the bathroom, just, out of my mouth, out of my rectum,
Oh my
blood. So I
goodness.
lost a lot of blood. It was bleeding. In the finality of this in 1969, they did full surgery, totally cracked me open, and did a duodenal resection. So they found a bleeding ulcer. Now, I think it was, H. pylori at that time, but they didn't have the
Yeah, the
ability to have
testing.
pharmaceuticals to take. So they went in, they did a resection, they cut out the ulcerated location, sewed me back up. And at the same time, we'll talk about this maybe another time, but for one reason, the guy decided, the doctor in his wisdom, cut my vagus nerve to the stomach. And you're like, you're kidding me, really? And it's kind of been an interesting effect because I don't feel hunger. So like I never have sensation of I'm
So
hungry.
that's your secret. Okay, now we know. No, I'm kidding. No. Oh, but geez, that throws off your nervous system so much if you don't have
Yeah, it's
that same
interesting. Yeah.
mechanism.
Yeah.
And obviously you're losing a big piece of absorption with that duodenum being resected. I mean, a lot of our essential minerals and such come into that area of absorption in that small intestine.
Yeah. So the results basically were like slow transit time and the inability to really to digest food, especially uncooked vegetables, popcorn. I've had obstruction specifically. And as I get older, you can imagine that small intestine area or the intestinal area of the duodenal at my age with the scar tissue, any irritation of that becomes inflammation. So that's my story. So
Oh,
from that, it was always kind of how do I deal with this as a man growing up? And then it was in the process of my studies and the process that I went through. But it's really with one of the founder people of Full Circle Health that really brought me to the point of what I want to talk about in terms of current, which was Larry Jordan working with Dr. Mary Schrick. And I got invited to basically be involved with Larry because we co-partnered for over a decade with Larry Jordan and Circle Health in formulating all these formulations specifically. But anyway, I suffer from that. So that's kind of where I came from trying to understand gut inflammation is a big part of my world. And supplementation and just even transit time was so slowed down that I just thought there had to be a better way. And really cut to the chase would just be my exposure back in the day, back in 2008, out here in in Palm Desert to Suzanne Summers was all involved at that time of really promoting compound pharmacists and how she was going along with hormone therapy. But what's interesting was the idea that you could take hormones through the skin. That was here. And I was involved with the compound pharmacists, some of my friends that were working there specifically, the compound pharmacists. And I saw what they were doing and I saw the benefits of this base, transdermal base at that time. It was one of the first types of transdermals. And I thought, gee, it was a petrochemical based transdermal at that time, pegylated specifically. And I thought, it works. How interesting about how the skin is so well absorbed to really effectively help people. And I actually had a friend, a lady that had a full hysterectomy at 35. And she was completely estrogen dominant. Her doctor prescribed estrogen to her, unopposed, no progesterone. And she was absolutely in pain, just a walking pain scenario, fibromyalgia all over her body. And it was just like, nothing seemed to help her. And it was that time where they were saying it's all in your head,
Yeah.
the pain of fibromyalgia. But upon going to see the compound pharmacist at that time, he had invited her in, said, look, let's just try something. I understand what your situation is, but that unopposed, progesterone is just, that ain't working.
Yeah.
Let me try some progesterone on your shoulders. And she was in like total physical pain. Rubbed the progesterone, just straight progesterone onto her shoulders. So why don't you walk around the clinic for about 5 minutes? And in the process, 5 minutes later, she is just gone. The pain was,
She was probably
she was
like in
crying.
tears. Yeah. I was like, she
Tears.
was probably in tears because, a lot of people don't understand that a lot of these hormones work along synergistically to so many of our neurotransmitters. So a lot of times when they say, oh, it's all in your head, but like progesterone's one of our feel-good hormones. It helps you sleep. It helps you relax. So imagine in fibromyalgia, you have all those little knots and hot spots, realistically, and just actually getting some hormones, but more so specifically the right hormones, I think is also very important to note because in
Yes.
the sense of somebody being so estrogen dominant and then them just removing such a progesterone receptive tissue, it's obviously there are breaks within our medical model and system, but there are ways that we can, kind of support in that holistic as well as, really integrative route of like, hey, we see the benefit of hormones, but maybe there's a safer and more effective way, an option
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. And that was kind of the charge at that time of, look, you got to be dealing with a compound pharmacist. He can compound a lot of different things for you. But what struck me was the effectiveness of the skin as a point of administration. And I thought, So originally I thought to myself, well, this is something in my background. I think I can do better. And then I went into the study of transdermal product line. What was
Yeah.
it made of? What was it all about? How is this possible?
You said more
How is the skin?
petroleum based, right?
Yeah, at that time, that was
Yeah.
what the basis was. So, and then to work on my background associated with that, I'd come back for close to 10 years in New Zealand, Australia, doing once again compound pharmacist engineering and involved in so many works. And my family had called me back because my mom was getting elder, and she's a church going lady, and I love going to church with her. But in my church with her, there was this fellowship. And I love the idea of meeting with other folks that are involved in this path
believers,
of
yeah.
fellowship, and ended up being filled with retired doctors. And as soon as I entered into this forum of chatting and sharing information, they just clamored around me in terms of my background and some of the things I was involved with the ability to have laboratory experience and process, that they said, oh, we'd love to deal with someone like you. We have so many ideas about creating formulations in 40 years of being a thoracic surgeon and all these different disciplines. I want to make this. I want to make that. Can you assist us? So within a very quick amount of time, in 2009, I had registered NutraRelief because I was specifically focused on nutraceuticals as a supplementation industry. This was the evolving supplementation. It was called nutraceuticals, and it was a new word at that time. It wasn't nutrient suggested of what it was, and people were coming to understand it. So I registered NutraRelief, and I had 15 doctors on the board of directors. Okay. Now, 15 doctors that had
A lot of ideas,
crazy.
I'm sure. A lot of ideas, a lot of things that probably could have been overwhelmed, right? And I mean, and that's why you do have a lot of tried and true formulations that I know that we're going to have some time to maybe talk about several of those here today. But I'm sure at that moment it was like overwhelmed. You're like, the options
Yeah,
are endless, but also what's going to be, as we expressed previously, the safest and more like efficacious way to get,
yeah,
and what formulas themselves are best processed
exactly.
or absorbed,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And then talking to doctors, I mean, having these meetings and talking about what are your ideas? And okay, let's talk about science. Okay. Is there science associated or quackery? Because it was just every amino acid, every vitamin there is, and then let's put lidocaine in it and let's swallow it,
Mm,
and you're like, wow, that's courage. It's
yeah.
and it was just humorous and fun at the same time of basically trying to separate. Doctors had science-based foundation in terms of understanding the body, the idea of absorption and how we could go
Hmm.
about this. But I was still focused back onto what I had experienced with the compound pharmacists. And so then my personal interest in terms of research, because that's basically
I
everything, the
know. You
literature, the
love it.
background, the research, what's going on. I saw this delivery technology, which is liposomal delivery, which basically eclipsed this basic idea of just the transdermal base, this
Hmm.
petrochemical base that was the pretty much basis of almost all of these compound pharmacies. And I thought, God, I could make a better base. And that would be the key to everything. At that time, I almost saw my world as Cold Stone ice cream. Remember that? They'd put
Hmm.
the vanilla on there and then they'd just blend in raisins and nuts and all of these things. And that was the only way.
Yeah.
That was not
You're
as
like,
simple as
no,
a
I can fix my toppings and it doesn't need to be vanilla, right? Or,
yeah, or supplement then with actual nutraceuticals in this base, and that's where the liposomal became so intriguing. I wanted something that was plant-based, I wanted something that was natural, and that was the beauty of finding, a liposome or liposomes as a delivery technology that literally could utilize the skin as the point of administration for supplementation, and so that is really the genesis of NutriRelief in terms of going forward. So, a number of the different doctors that were associated with me, one of my partners at that time was Dr. Alan Schwartz, who since passed away from Parkinson's, but he specialized in autistic children, specifically the effects of children and their sufferings, and how he really, really a special. He wrote a book, a really interesting book called Autism Revealed, and we're really going back to the genesis of why,
mhm.
how children got autism. Was it on the spectrum specifically? What was the genesis of that? Very intriguing book. But then we created some of the formulations to address the mind function of that,
Mm,
like GABA L-theanine specifically, and sleep associated with this, and the nervous system and the blood system in terms of amplifying blood flow,
mm.
microcirculation to the brain, then the gut axis for all of that. So these are all the basics of what you do as a functional practitioner. I mean, this is the basis of it. He was on that time. And so that kind of led the charge for us for our original formulations at the time.
I was just going to state, I mean, obviously that's so amazing. And it's, as somebody that's actively working with patients and I see, they come in with bags and bags of supplements and realistically speaking, they're minimizing, we look at their labs and it's like, okay, you're taking all this vitamin D and none of it's being absorbed. And, obviously being in that functional realm, we dive into potentially why it's not being absorbed, but still in that interim, while maybe we are addressing gut health or we are trying to stabilize other vitamins, minerals to get that absorption optimized, that's when, I mean, I think the common mistake is give them more, right? And I think that that's always time what we see is like, oh, you're not absorbing at 5,000 IU vitamin D, let's give you 10,000. Or,
Right.
instead of recognizing, well, maybe this is not the preferred method of absorption for this individual. And as you expressed, our skin is one of our largest organs in our body. And so, we're obviously working through our digestive system, and that's amazing. But at the same instance, the skin is, I would say, underappreciated really for all the things that
Yeah.
it does. But through the more naturopathic lens, we always look at the system as in a balance, right? So, like your skin, your digestive system, your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, and your lymphatic system all work in this intricate balance to help you detox and cleanse, but also a way to absorb and take in. So I think it was amazing that you kind of, through your own journey and awareness, you're like, this is a very interesting way that we're seeing, positive outcomes. People are, this is an untapped market for us to try to further, and also make it cleaner realistically. I mean, the fact is that the petroleum base is not always the cleanest way, as much as
Mm,
it probably, and not really that well absorbed either,
yeah.
considering, because it's kind of like an emollient. It kind of sits on top of the skin, as opposed to the liposomal, formulations themselves is like the same as the phospholipid bilayer in all of our cells. So that outer
Yes,
ring,
exactly.
so the body just kind of recognizes it as self and just says, "Oh, thank you. I needed this, actually, this vitamin." So if you wouldn't mind, just explain a little bit more to our listeners about that liposomal technology and
Yeah.
how it came about.
Yeah, and so that is really the key, as you put it, is that looking at a base and looking at what is a better way and how do we go about this in terms of creating anything that's entering the body that's going to be as natural and clean as possible. And that's where looking at liposomes, there were various forms and have the whole technology of liposomal development has evolved so much. But at that time, I was really specific looking for a plant-based liposome. And that's when I
Mm,
focused on in that stage in lecithin, sunflower plant-based liposomes that were derived. And this was beautiful because it was just a plant-based lecithin is, a nootropic also within that context. So it's basically
mhm,
brain function, helpful for all aspects, but as a liposomal delivery technology as the basis for this, I saw that as being really a beautiful form. There's a
mm,
soy form, there's a vegan form, and I really wanted it to be sunflower just because the basis of that, I really felt that that
yeah.
was important. And then working with Dr. Alan Schwartz, he was the function of the brain. He liked it too. And so that was really the point of where we just said, okay, let's really focus then on this delivery technology. So I registered, trademark, and patented LDT, liposomal delivery technology. And then so what I ended up developing from that stage, and we can talk about liposomes
Mhm.
directly, but then I ended up working where, okay, let's develop a clinical line specifically for supplementation for doctors to use in their clinic. So this whole concept of Nutraleaf was basically fabricating and formulating a direct source for a clinical line for natural practitioners and all disciplines. And let's talk about the disciplines that you use. And I got some exciting collaboration I'd like to really dive into. That could be another topic, but that we could create a line for practitioners. And that was it. Formulations. Let's see the basics: sleep, brain health, microcirculation, neuropathy, pain relief, detoxification, and then hormones specifically. And so all of those are interesting topics to dive into. How did we go about them? That's the other thing. Talking about a formulation. What are the cofactors we put into them? How do they
Yeah.
work? Why do we not put certain things in them? Why do we have a single product like a magnesium citrate? Can't you blend that into your melatonin, night cream at the same time? What works? What doesn't work? And going back to the cold stone thing, it's not that easy just to put. It's a really
Mhm.
art form. It's really an art form with, in my lab specifically, the technicians that are putting together are specifically the gal I work with for years and years, Rebecca right now, for years. She's an artist of being able to use these wonderful emollients together with the phytonutrients, together with amino acid, minerals, and some hormones in cases for progesterone and probalance and estradiol, estradiol,
Well,
and we create these different this complete line.
Well, and which is honestly, like you expressed, there's so many formulas themselves that have been so thought through. And I think that there's a layer of like the biggest bang for our buck, in the sense that if you're looking for a formula that supports sleep, well, look no further. It's been so thought through, which I think is beautiful and amazing. But I wanted to touch on two pieces. One is therapeutic dosing. So how is that different than, obviously, the liposomals are, 1 to 2 pumps, et cetera, versus a lot of those other supplementations? I mean, patients are taking, 6 capsules to equivalent potentially what we're getting with a very small dose. So would you mind elaborating a little bit on that
Yeah.
therapeutic dosing?
Yeah. It's wonderful when we talk. There's so many things we can deep dive, and then it's like, whoo,
We
we
don't have
went
time for that.
everywhere.
No, I love it.
Yeah. But that is really one of the beauties of the benefits of liposomal technology, basically utilizing the skin as the point of administration rather than the gut. So the idea of anything you could literally take orally, it's your hope, pray, and
Mm-hmm.
hope that you're going to digest it effectively and it'll be distributed in your body. Where the skin, the point of administration to directly to your skin is targeted nutrition. So in the context of pain or neuropathy, you've got locations on the body that, as a
Mm,
protocol to apply these creams, you can put them directly at the location of pain, inflammation, neuropathy, and then the aspect also for brain function too, the carotid artery in the back of the neck,
mm-hmm.
or utilizing in protocols your feet, reflexology associated with that in terms of taking advantage of the
Mm-hmm.
pores are 30% larger. So the pore capacity, the body, the ability of the skin to absorb is really what was so intriguing.
Yeah.
And we talk about the effectiveness, for example, of the pain cream, of the trauma max tension release, specifically trauma max tension relief, to just make sure we're not talking about, pain overtly, but that
Mm-hmm.
tension release is really another word for relieving pain specifically, but that you
Mm-hmm.
can target locations. The benefit of this topical cream and the way it's distributed is that 2 pumps equal a quarter measuring teaspoon. So we measure mostly everything as a dosage in a quarter measuring teaspoon. For
Mm-hmm.
example, let's take the melatonin night cream, for example. So 2 pumps will give you quarter measuring teaspoon, which is 5 milligrams
Milligrams.
of
Yeah.
melatonin. But as you point out, which is so interesting, is what functional doctors really enjoy is this idea of titration, which is,
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe you need a little more, maybe you need less. What about my kids? Can I offer this to my children? Yeah, we can really titrate down and give
Up
just a
and down.
micro dosing if you want, or just a small pump or a pea-sized pump. But it's also the idea of the body tells us the absorption. When you've got effective creams, magnesium citrate, and you've got digestive issues, or you've got restless leg syndrome, or you've got
Mm-hmm.
conditions that you want to see an effect, and you take it orally, it's kind of like, I
Yeah,
hope,
you
I'm
gotta
waiting,
wait.
I'm
I
wanting to
know.
see. The effectiveness of these topical creams to effectively, quickly send the message that they're working specifically in pain relief or restless leg syndrome or in consistent bowel movements, you really say, wow, this really works. So I've tagged the phrase of the skin is a better mouth. It just works in a way that you can titrate up, titrate down. So a doctor like yourself can basically say you've got sleep issues. We have 3 different protocols for sleep. Sleep is like the winner of them all for us. I can solve any sleep issue because it's just basically trying to determine, your sleep protocol, your sleep
Yeah.
hygiene, how do you go about getting ready for sleep? And then what is it? Is it, insomnia, anxiety? Is it restless mind, monkey mind? Is it stress?
Yeah. Wired but tired.
And all these different aspects. Now, melatonin, that's a beautiful concept. A lot of people have an understanding of what that means,
Mm-hmm.
but it may not mean something for you. I myself orally can't take melatonin. It
Oh
makes
yeah,
me
it makes you feel
delirious.
weird. I know. And I mean,
Delirious.
the
Yeah.
other layer is the fact that we have so many functional tools at our disposal to truly actively and objectively gauge. Not only do patients state, "Hey, I'm sleeping better, I feel better," but through some of our functional test analysis, we can actually see what was her melatonin at starting point and what's her melatonin after. And obviously, as you expressed, it's a cream or any supplement of any sort is a piece of it, right? Sleep hygiene, other aspects obviously bring it all into light. But even the timing, like let's say it is more anxiety driven, maybe the GABA L-theanine earlier in the day and then the melatonin at night. Like maybe there are different ways that we can incorporate those sleep formulas and kind of relaxing efforts for the individual. And that's why I love the topical approach in creams, because it's a lot easier to throw a little tube in your purse as opposed to a big capsule bottle
Yeah.
and worried about how much you're taking, et cetera. So but I know I threw us for a loop there by even bringing that up, but I just love the approach with the functional, which allows us to test so that we can
Yeah.
more closely monitor, one, obviously safety is always, but the efficacy and how do we titrate, how do we support. But even when Daniel, when you mentioned the instant relief, I know for a fact, I mean, the Trauma Max is a formulation that we carry in my house. I mean, my husband uses it on a regular basis for, after he's done pitching or something. It's
Hmm.
it's that immediate. And it's it's amazing to have something like that in your arsenal that's not a capsule, because I think so much of even functional medicine is getting a bad rep because it's like, instead of a handful of medications, let's give you a handful of vitamins. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's great. But at the same instance, then you're even burdening one of your systems and, kind of throwing everything out of balance. But
Yeah. 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 So the titration aspect of it is really interesting. That word for your audience is this, that, take a little, take more, take less, and the body will tell you. But even also for applications of, as I said, one of the first creams we got involved with was a GABA L-theanine for Dr. Schwartz, because he was really concerned about calming down this autistic oversensitivity, everyone on the spectrum. And how do we deliver that in a topical cream? And then the delivery method of getting it into the bloodstream. So it really was just so wonderful how we could create this calming presence for autistic children, really see, and just also for parents. I
yeah,
mean, when
all
I observe
caregivers.
parents taking an autistic child on the spectrum to the beach, just watching him get out of the car, and then a child with headphones on and get to the beach where it should just be this ecstatic opportunity, just go absolutely nuts. And the
Mm,
parents just, what do we do? Do we go? Do we not go? Do we go? And
I know.
just because he was overexposed to just the ocean and the environment
Overstimuli.
just blew his mind. And it was just a matter of calming him down to be able to get to the point of where I could, I approached those parents, and it was, future relationship that we had in terms of, oh, this changes the spectrum delivery aspect for calming, and also even for the parents too, because
Yeah.
they're overreacting to everything too. So, and
Well,
just
and
a simple amino acid, to be able to deliver it, and the effects of a simple amino acid like GABA, and then amino acid together, how it's just a calming effect for a brain function, which is really quite amazing.
in terms of like the clinical data that we might carry for this, like how does your formulations compare to maybe some other formulations that might be out there? Especially, is it solely that patented LDT, the transdermal aspect that's so different? Has that been extended into other formulas that you're aware of?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, we have like 38 different formulations, but it just comes down to, dollars and donuts to, what can we formulate, and what are the doctors looking for? Because if we can't have really sell through, I made some really amazing. I mean, I had an NAD formulation that was just really spectacular, but it was trying to introduce people to that time with NMN, and
Hmm.
I wanted a separate pathway. We can dive deep into this. So it's always this, try these different formulations in terms of their working, but we're following with standard protocols for supplementation. One of the doctors that's been with me originally on my scientific board is Dr. Stephen Levine, who is the creator of Allergy Research. I mean, this big pharmacological company.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing with Larry Jordan, myself, we created formulations at the time that he then utilized to make in pill form. So we
Wow.
had we were creating research to, hey, we're gonna make this. And so my scientific board has always been the case. Okay, we're thinking about this. What do you think are cofactors that you got to put this into it? That would be great. Could we do that? Let's try that. Let's see what happens. And so we're creating these formulations and then putting them in clinicians' hands basically to try them and see how
Hmm.
effective they are being. But it's also the basis of working backwards. For example, in allergy research, I mean, Stephen Levine back in the early 70s created the first melatonin tablet.
Hmm.
Before, you couldn't take melatonin in that form. So he was the godfather really of bringing melatonin and the studies associated with that. But then, I mean, he made millions obviously selling it to Kikkoman, the soy sauce group. But that's an amazing company of all these formulations. And looking also at, I'm always looking at existing supplemental formulations and then deciphering them to put them into a topical cream. Why wouldn't they work?
Oh,
Why the digestive system? And so much of this has really been the basis of it. So registering liposomal delivery technology was just that the basis of this is that because of the phospholipid nature of the sphere, and I hope so we can do this, we can show on this, because I sent the deck over to Lauren there in the marketing
yeah.
department, that we can maybe put up,
Put
what
some
is a
visuals.
phospholipid, the visual, and how does it carry that supplement inside. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, that the basis of lecithin coming from sunflower plant-based, and the phospholipid sphere is what carries it to the skin, through the skin, but it's metabolized on contact because each
Mm,
skin cell, our
just
natural
registers it.
endogenous ability to create a phospholipid around every skin cell, around every blood cell. So when our topicals reach in through the skin, they're being metabolized on contact. The cell then is bringing it through into the capillaries and absorbing through the capillary blood, through diffusion, and then the blood cells themselves are taking up these products on contact.
Yeah.
So the acid test for every individual that was listening is going, sounds interesting, but what you're saying is, how can I be sure it's working? Then there's the example of the Trauma Max. Okay, let's
Hmm.
use that as a acid test for, I want to try liposomal. I'm not sure, but I heard it sounded great, but give me an example. Trauma Max. I blew my shoulder out, or I have a knee, I'm about to have knee surgery or hip surgery replacement. I've got pain, bone on bone. I got pain. Help me. How can this work? By using targeted one location, taking the Trauma Max and putting 3 pumps for an initial delivery technology on this as a let's starting point,
Hmm.
and rubbing that on a specific targeted location of pain. And within minutes,
Minutes.
you have pain relief. I mean, not pain relief in terms of, from night and day.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
like,
you don't
it's
have a
so
brand new
subtle.
oh, but it's so subtle, but it's so amazing, I guess, when you feel it firsthand because, like you expressed, there is always some skepticism, and I think, especially my husband was the biggest. He's like, "Okay, we'll try." And
The
now
cream.
he has it, yeah, like now he literally brings it in his gym bag. You know what I mean? Like it's something that it's such a subtle thing. It's almost like you don't even recognize that discomfort is there. Like, you've been so used to being in pain. And then as soon as you apply that, like you said, within minutes. And that's really the biggest difference in similarly to what you expressed about not only the delivery system, but the timing tends to be pretty, a lot faster than going through the digestive tract. The body has to, it has to make it through the acid. It's got to make it through, the whole digestion to then be uptaken by the capillaries at the digestive level, which unfortunately we know are so much more compromised. That's where the whole phrase leaky gut and all those other
Yeah.
things are stemming from is from a compromised GI. And so, digestive dysfunction, malabsorption is a big, you know, functional thing that I see on a day to day. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes patients, and let's be real, some other avenues that patients are maybe familiar with would be like intravenous therapy and aspects like that.
Mhm.
But who wants to, first and foremost, financially, it's a very expensive process. And secondarily, not everybody is keen on getting one bolus or needles in general in one instance and allowing the
Yeah.
body to uptake it slowly. So that's why I like the approach that you can do this kind of as needed, but also titrate up and down based on somebody's individual needs. I mean, and I'm going to just say it. The fact that you use sunflower lecithin is just like enough for me to be like sold because people don't understand that how one first and foremost so much of the things that we place on our skin are so toxic unfortunately, and that's where I we could talk about that all day, but secondarily so many of the lecithin formulations that we get or see are actually soy based, and as we know soy tends to be a higher inflammatory, it tends to be processed so much more. So the fact that you thought outside even one layer deeper to say sunflower lecithin is a better option, I mean,
Yeah.
that enough should make people just know that it matters, obviously, the relationships that the clinicians carry with their formulators. I mean, how amazing is that? But secondarily, that you've thought this through like 15 steps ahead. I mean, I just think that
Mm.
that's so amazing.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Well, I have a wonderful scientific board. I've got really interesting is doctors from the Center for Occupational and Environmental Studies. That's really interesting. Dr. William Weirs and Dr. Stephen Elliott, who've been using our progesterone cream since the beginning in terms of their application. And it's clinical line. Like I said, I've got so many situations where we have clinicians that are using them and it's an adjunct to their practice. So, rather than writing a script, they can write a script now for NutriRelief. They can carry it if they want to in terms of affiliation with the line, having it in their office, or
Hmm.
just write a script and people contact us directly. And so that's really a wonderful way that we've offered it. But I like the idea that my scientific board is constantly contributing. So this is not, I don't have a clinical practice per se. I'm a researcher and basically a formulator, have a wonderful lab and a researcher, and always looking for literature that's verifying specifically the studies in terms of detoxification, digestion, and all the different types of formulations we can make within the supplemental industry. So the idea is I want to supplement, but I want to understand that. And the key to that is really the articulation of let's talk about how to utilize what are the protocols and how we use these creams. What is the idea behind this in the formulation of this product? I have to confess, I really enjoyed watching a video of yours and then just kind of going back and seeing kind of the information associated with, how she's running her podcast right now, because we used to talk on the phone
Yeah.
blind, but now we're seeing each other and, the evolution of that. And I had the chance to see you talk to Dr. Joe DiGero,
Yeah.
right?
Didero.
DiGero?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just like so listening, going, this is great. This is fantastic. But then to learn that he was your dad and that relationship of a father to daughter, and it just really was very interesting to me because that's in your DNA, right? That's what you're all about in terms of where you evolved and how you came to this circumstance of creating this. But a number of points, if I could just bring up to it, which was really
Definitely.
critical
Please.
to me, which was so wonderful, was this idea of your perfect secret sauce in your practice. And it's really what's come to understanding is the idea of baseline, in that functional testing is really essential in understanding where am I standing today in terms of my clinicians that are working with these creams.
Mm-hmm.
By taking these tests and functionally being able to see your deficiencies, and you want to supplement to just those deficiencies, just a physiological dose, not
Mm-hmm.
an overdose. We're looking at low dose micro dosing, to be honest with you, versus 200, 1,000 milligrams of something to the digestive system. Let's just give a physiological dose to just what you're deficient in and let the body heal itself for what it's lacking. And you talked about the secret sauce of like the photomodulation. I wanted to talk, I think we could talk about our collaboration on that for a long time.
Biomodulation.
Modulation
Yeah.
and then supplementation. So you got a baseline of what you're deficient in. You can look at using photomodulation in terms of increasing just the functions of the body's natural function. But then, okay, and the only thing lacking there really in this could be just some appropriate supplementation for sleep, specifically for
Mm-hmm.
recovery, for detoxification, for neuropathy, microcirculation. So it just makes perfect sense,
Oh, I
just the way we
know.
go
Because
about
if
that.
you're thinking about how it absorbs, especially as you expressed, the autistic community is such an amazing community with photobiomodulation and applying the nutrients so that, okay, maybe we're bringing the blood flow, but are we bringing in the nutrients associated with that blood flow to optimize and sustain those cellular membranes to keep them firing at this so that you don't have to keep going back and reinventing the wheel? We're actually changing the cells and improving their function and communication. I mean, yes, I definitely think that that's a realm and an area that we can synergize our protocols further so that patients,
Yeah.
when they present and maybe are utilizing, because a lot of times in practice at Full Circle Health, we're doing a lot of photobiomodulation for pain management.
Yeah.
And so that's an area where, having the Trauma Max or having some of those nitric oxide boosting formulas and such present to maximize that 15, 30-minute session that they might be receiving in
Yeah.
that instance. So I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely think we need to
Yeah.
hone in on that. But even like what you expressed, the functional assessments. And I think that at this point, so many individuals has access to information, but it's hard to gauge, is this information applicable to me? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe this person's feeling this, this, and this, but everybody's cortisol rhythm or cortisol, let's say adrenal fatigue is different. Some of us are wired but tired. Some of us are flatlined. Some of it, so that's where having a way to really know when to even apply the creams. Like if you're having a cortisol swing late at night or if you're having it midday, it's amazing to, as you expressed, to be able to time it and be very specific, okay, at 4 p.m. you peak. Well, maybe if we incorporate something to calm you neurologically during that time and stabilize, so I just think that the avenues, but even the research side of it and following and tracking some cases together would be really fun as well to really see how they
Absolutely. No,
they work.
it's really, there's so many instances of the testimonials. Anecdotal information is really kind of key. The literature's all there in terms of these cofactors and supplementation and what supplements do. But when you apply them topically, it's a whole nother shebang, in that situation. What's going on? How is my absorption and the effectiveness of that? Also with that baseline and seeing 90 days later, wow, no longer deficient. I mean, like the absorption, it's just factual there. So I love that baseline of blood tests specifically for functional testing. And then you understand the situation, but then let's just fill those holes of deficiency, low in magnesium, low on D3, specifically your immune system. Other thing that came out with your conversation with Dr. Joe, which was so intriguing, was the triple T: thoughts, toxins, and trauma. That is definitely the basis of everybody's world that we're all
Mhm.
living in. And that capacity to really consult with an individual to say, hey, we have solutions for you, but you've got to be aware of
Mm.
the world you're living in, the chronic activities that you're involved with that are creating these situations. It's not just in your mind, but it is that you absolutely realize that the world we live on is so full of chaos in this moment that it's really kind of a matter of looking at myself and doing a self-evaluation of
Yeah.
how can I help myself to
Individualized
deal with
approaches.
this life. So I really found that fantastic. And as we talked about before, the basis of the lymphatic system, the glymph system and the lymphatic of releasing toxins. And the two main doctors I have in that department are Dr. William Weirs and Dr. Stephen Elliott at COEM, which is in North Carolina.
Oh,
S-
yeah.
uh,
Pretty close to
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
yeah. But they're involved in occupational and environmental issues. So they're dealing with toxicity all the
Yeah.
time.
Mold and
And
things like
yeah,
that, I'm sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
And those are big things. So that's a big part of their practice and using the topical creams. And
Yeah.
they're kind of opening up in a big way for me because they really see that the whole clinical line is something that can be so beneficial for clinicians to really have in their toolbox.
Yeah.
Chiropractors too. And then specifically, really want to focus on the soft wave for you and for me. And this application is so intriguing because pre soft wave, post soft wave,
Hmm.
recovery from soft wave. And then the one thing I really kind of wanted to say just about that philosophy that you and Dr. Joe were talking about is what I see the active mind body process is that my wife brought it up to me in terms of the testimonies of people that were just so thankful about these topical creams. And it just realized something to me is the idea of your functional doctor and what you do. And I use this concept of applying these creams in the sense of the overall function. Why did you get in medicine? But the healing hands aspect of it. So the old docs, remember in the day, the Western docs, I mean, all they really had were their hands and a stethoscope to really evaluate your body. They touched your body. They felt your body. They were involved with talking
Hmm.
with you. And in Nutraleaf, that philosophy has been translated to the individual using the topical creams.
Hmm.
When I educate and talk about why I made these creams to an individual, how they work through the skin, and it's you yourself, say, taking two creams or blending creams and putting them on a location yourself, and
Hmm.
you're involved with your own hands, understanding, I really hope
Yeah.
this works. And you're involved in your own healing hands. This is
It's
really
mind body.
something.
It's, unfortunately, so much of us, like you expressed, the world is chaos. And so many of us are being blinded by tuning in and listening to our bodies. We're kind of being pushed in to just keep on going. And then the body has to send louder and louder signals. And then you have a hot joint. And then you have, a big, scab on your face or whichever. These are, we do have to kind of slow down, listen to our body more closely. But for those of us that maybe are not as skilled or maybe have missed that window in time or maybe are looking to avoid that, that's where functional medicine obviously shines in order to kind of take a look inward. I mean, we have so many tools at our disposal, and that was one of my more, I guess, advanced level questions was, are we considering some genetic polymorphisms when even designing some of these formulas, especially, I know we have the formulation in particular. And I know that a lot of times, especially with methylation status and so many individuals being concerned with that, has that been something that we've considered when making some of these formulas?
Yeah, like PCOS and MTHFR and the genetic diseases that women have specifically, and then they're seeing that and realizing it, and then, hey, I've got it. So what have you got that basically can effectively help? And this is a concept of detoxification, methylation,
Hmm.
and the process of digestion, which is so intriguing. But then they're lacking that ability within that context: leaky gut, irritable bowel syndrome, all of this function, and the brain's biome connection, it falls right in line with using the skin as the point of administration for that aspect of absorption and helping specifically in that glutathione and
Well,
the
that's what I
ways
was
that you're
just going to mention, because obviously one of the familiar gene SNPs that I've been seeing through the 3x4 genetics is a pathway called GSTM1, which is basically kind of the bridge to make glutathione. And some of us have that bridge is deleted. So us taking oral glutathione is not as active. So it's almost like you can take it all day, but your liver doesn't have the enzyme to basically convert it and make it usable. So you're paying for very expensive poop, okay? And so I love, for a lot of patients, especially, I would say one of the most common things that I note clinically and see correlations with is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or,
yes,
hypothyroidism and biliary tract dysfunction. And so potentially applying that topical glutathione topically over the
definitely,
thyroid, topically
definitely,
over that liver gallbladder to assist with kind of that connection. As you expressed, it's also, taking that extra layer and connecting to the body. And if we're seeing high bilirubin, high ALK phos, high AST to ALT, it's like, okay, the liver and the biliary tract is having stress. Well, imagine putting a sunflower lecithin based glutathione that's readily absorbed in this population directly on that tissue type. That is so much more like, it's so eye opening for the body. It's like, wow, they're
yeah,
listening, it's
yeah, yeah.
amazing.
And it really makes sense. So, Hashimoto, where I've got some thyroid issue, isn't even as men. I mean, look at this HRT. I've dealt with a lot of, I get a lot of inquiries and I formulate for some
Mhm.
crazy individuals, whether they eventually making a product or not. But, this HRT is gaining, and they're like, well, we don't have anything. We're just giving testosterone. But guess what they're getting? They're getting men, 25-year-olds on testosterone, injectable, and thyroid immediately. Oh, it makes them feel 97% of the guys are saying, yeah, I feel great because thyroid, but I don't even have a thyroid. So they're messing with the hormones directly
Wow.
in pill form.
Hmm.
And then my attitude is like, well, hey, let's not worry about thyroid per se, unless the guy's got a thyroid issue. But how about if you're suspecting that in terms of maybe, your evaluation of delivering
Hmm.
testosterone, how about putting, glutathione and the cofactor? This is the beauty is you'll see in a lot of my formulas the cofactor, and that
Hmm.
cofactor in the glutathione plus is N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. So you've got the N-acetyl, you've got then generating glutathione, and then glutathione itself in free form. But yeah, directly on your thyroid. So imagine a woman who's got a thyroid issue, and now she's thinking of, am I taking, you know,
Enough support and
adrenal support and all these different things associated orally. And then, oh, I've heard about the patch, a patch I can wear. And then, wait, well, I can take glutathione, I can rub it directly on my thyroid, and then, master antioxidant and just so effective in terms of that. And then, your doctor seeing this protocol utilized.
And then
It's
imagine
just,
the photobiomodulation concept potentially on top of that, allowing that to penetrate to a cellular level and all of that. I mean, that's amazing.
I mean, we
I
got to
think,
talk.
yeah, yeah, we definitely do. Because I mean, I think that, as I expressed, a lot of times patients think, oh, I need something fancy. I need to take more. Like, that's kind of the society, unfortunately, that we live in. And as a naturopathic provider, our philosophy is least invasive, right? Start
Yes.
with the most effective way and obviously close to nature as possible. And so many of even what I expressed, the formulations, like the carrier that we're using in these formulas, I mean, it's just like, it's very clean, it works, it's safe, as you expressed, the titration aspect and functional medicine pairs so well with it that it allows us to really tap into how can this be individually approached for you. So I guess my biggest question is, like, what excites you the most outside of maybe our potential continuation of time together and discussion? But it's like, what excites you the most about, the future of this nutraceutical science and basically the supplement industry that you've basically created with your technology.
Yeah, well, it's really like sports medicine is really intriguing to me in terms of what you're involved with in terms of healing athletes and the idea of accelerating the healing
Hmm.
process of ligaments, muscles, and tendons. And that's something where we really can be effective in utilizing these protocols, these new protocols for trying to help athletes return. Sleep is a big issue that I'm excited about. Now, I have my baseline product line, but like I say, I've got 38 formulations. I really'd like to get back into those. And I'm always, I'm looking at the literature, I'm looking at the biohackers, I'm looking at what they're intrigued
Hmm.
with, and the sensibility of what would go and what would work together. So it's unlimited, but at the same time, it's got to be based upon my clinicians that
Hmm.
they're working with it and how are they utilizing the tools. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's what they forget. They kind of want to, unless they have experience of utilizing them, do they really know how they work? So I'm spending my time
Teaching
specifically
them,
the
yeah.
base. Yeah, I like these conversations because if I'm dealing directly with a practitioner, functional medicine, naturopaths, and even in cancer protocols, I mean, melatonin is
Hmm.
being utilized big time in cancer protocols right now.
Definitely.
And so we really see the idea of making the application and the ease of their folks that have these afflictions, how they can use them and administer themselves and see these
Hmm.
protocols being utilized by education, saying this really works. So that's exciting. That's
Right.
exciting to me. And what I like is looking at my clinical line being a new tool for you as a practitioner. I mean,
Yeah.
I really think that's exciting. When I see a practitioner going, I've been looking for something like this as an adjunct to my practice.
Yeah.
Okay. People are tired of he's going to walk in 20 seconds later and he's going to write a prescription for me or he doesn't really know. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And then you're taking two blood pressure medications or then, for weight loss, it's Ozempic. And what's going to be the results of all this Ozempic activity? And,
Well, we need to
just,
stay on top of it for sure, and we can talk about that. But the other thing that I was thinking about when it comes to soft wave and the benefits that some of our formulas your formulas in particular can offer is, the collagen ultimate, like that booster, the niacinamide
niacinamide
formulation.
10%.
Yeah. And just
Yes.
utilizing that over maybe some of those areas that if you're having degeneration, maybe we're bringing that blood flow, but you need some more of those building blocks in order to really
Yeah.
regenerate that tissue space so that you can get maximal improvement because with so many of my efforts as a naturopathic provider is I don't want you to be reliant on anything that I'm ultimately giving you. I want your body to be able to do it on its own is the main goal, right? But at the same instance, we want to be looking into what would be the biggest bang for our buck, but also the
Yeah.
safest and most effective route to support the body in each one of those layers that it's going through. So, like, if I'm healing, then I want to put that as a hierarchy, right? If I have a need and I don't want to get knee replacement surgery, well, then maybe, we need to invest on top of the soft wave and the red lights, like some of those
Yeah.
topical approaches to really help. And then okay, that was what we did during the sessions. What are things, doc, that I need to do after to sustain the benefits of with the soft wave or other modalities that we've explored?
Yeah.
Well, then that's where some of these topical approaches and this the safety realistically is something that's so appealing to me
Yeah.
because drug interactions is a true concern, especially for so many of our patients. So would you say that that's a concern as much so? Obviously, still the constituents you still have to be mindful, but have you seen or noticed any major interactions with utilizing the topical amongst some of those other, let's say, prescriptive efforts that some patients are on?
Yeah, I mean, I just see that it's effective from the standpoint of where people are adjusting their ability to take a product and seeing the effects of it at a low cost. Also, that they're applying it themselves when needed. It's trying to understand the protocols to see the effects of this.
Mhm.
But I can't, I can't emphasize more the idea that people just aren't doing your secret sauce. I mean, they're not getting that baseline because so for so long, people would go and get a blood test and they wouldn't even know. They'd go to the
Yeah.
doctor, say, "Hey, I had my blood test. How am I myself even experiencing? I had fatty liver, I had hepatitis." The other background story of spending so much time in South America, Mexico, traveling around the world and what I was exposed to, and got contagious hepatitis
Mm.
and really just, had some scarring in my liver. And that's that along with the duodenal
Oh my
ulcer,
gosh.
that's
Yeah.
been difficult all my life. But the key ends up being is that you get this baseline. The secret trajectory is getting baseline and supplementing just to your deficiencies on just a general attitude of, well,
Hmm.
you're sleepy, you're tired, you're fibromyalgia, you got everything going associated, but let's just supplement to deficiencies as a baseline. And then you've got aches and creaks and pains and shoulders, then you've got the photomodulation associated with that. But now, as before you leave, let's make sure let's supplement up. And then within a 90-day period, which is a short amount of time as a practitioner to then evaluate, you could do another blood test and all of a sudden see these levels are now adequate levels. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
And now you're now focused on the mirage of all these different things. And now you can really focus on what is it really about? Is it about neuropathy? Are you really
Correct.
diabetic? Are you,
Yeah.
your mobility? Oh, I don't sleep. Okay. Lymphatic system.
You're able to
You
dive
just
into the root.
focus.
But also, I
Yeah.
mean, working with a functional provider is such a different experience because they are reassessing and we are talking about the labs and talk about mind body connection. If you know what's happening in your body, it obviously, offsets that so much further for you to be like, oh, that makes sense. I understand why you're saying XYZ because it's so shocking to me, just similarly to what you expressed, that so many patients go to the doctor and they're like, oh, everything looks good. And it's kind of this backwards way of thinking that the doctor knows more than you because they went to school and but you live in your body, you know it best. And so that's what I also think when you talked about like that application to self. I mean, it's so validating, when you feel this pain and you put something on it, it's just such a, TLC moment for your body to be like, okay, like we're working on it, right? As opposed to not. And so I flip the script so often in my patients' meetings because I'm like, this is what I'm seeing and I explain it, but I'm like, do you experience, this symptom or that? And they'll be like, yeah, that, and it's so interesting to kind of flip it the other way instead of I know everything. It's like, no, actually the labs help guide me, but you live in your body, you know it best.
Yeah.
And through those interactions, we're able to fine tune realistic approaches when it even comes to diet. Not everybody can make their own sourdough and, and do all these, fermented foods on their own. We have to be realistic in the modern day that we live in. And that's why I think you're kind of bridging that gap with utilizing potent, good quality nutraceuticals like the formulations themselves, but you're bridging it in the sense that you're not forgetting the philosophy of, physician like lead, right? Because you're obviously looking at the clinicians to better guide the patients and deciphering which formula might be best. And so, do you always offer great support? I know for myself, I've experienced it, but for any of those listeners, I mean, whenever there's a question or a doubt on a formulation on how to apply it, how to use it, or maybe pick your brain. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about Daniel is he's always accessible for those things. He always is
Yes.
open to even expanding on what he's already doing. Like if you make something and you're like, what I think I need, he's going to be like, huh, I never thought of that. And then you'll go in and learn more about it. And so I just
Yeah.
think that that's really the avenue and layer that you want to be in is in working alongside formulators and doctors and clinicians, et cetera, that are willing to keep learning and growing and expanding because that's what science and truly healing is, right? So I'm just
Yeah.
so excited and so grateful. I know that we didn't have as much time today to dive into the specific formulas themselves, but I'm eager to talk about pain, as you express sleep, and even just some of the kind of baseline formulas that I think a lot of people might be, overburdened with taking supplements like magnesium and
Yeah.
B12. And so I think that there might be a good window in time for us to regroup and talk further. But would you like to add anything before I kind of close this out today?
Yeah. I mean, I hope we can continue to do this. I mean, I do a lot of webinars. I'm on a number of different platforms, closed platforms. So they're in-house. And that's usually what it is. It's about focusing on the topical creams, protocols, how to utilize them. But then it's Q&A and not being a doctor, but my clinician background
Mm.
with all of these doctors, I have a scientific board that I reference to be able to say, if I don't have that answer or people with like kind issues, ailments, they're utilizing this, and this is what their
Yeah.
experience has been. But I get a lot of Q&A specifically. I'm giving what my scientific board is utilizing and how they're utilizing these topical creams in their clinics. So it's a clinical line I have access to that I formulated, but it's really the basis of the science and doctors' boards that I'm referencing. But I just do a lot of that because this is the time. But let's really try to keep this, because we basically just did an introduction. Like,
Oh,
hey,
definitely. This is
who is
just
this
intro.
guy? Yeah.
What
And
what
then
does he
let's
have?
dive deep.
And I mean, and I just want to maybe you can kind of show in the background. Y'all can see those little vials back there. Those are many of the main
Yeah.
formulas, the
Yeah.
liposomal formulas. Yeah, the line and all beautifully set there. And I'm just so beyond grateful, Daniel, that we had this time together. Although short, it was a good kind of intro for patients to curb their interest and hopefully
Yeah.
get more future podcasts to come and times for us to discuss the formulas, because I think this is very much needed. And I think it needs to be more discussed and accessible, that there are other options. And that's really what alternative and integrative practices are offering, is options for different people. Right. So I'm grateful. I'm thankful. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So thank you so much for joining, Daniel.
Thank you, Dr. Adelena. Let's do this again. Okay.
Of course.
Thank you for tuning in to the Third Opinion podcast, where we believe your health deserves more than just one perspective. If you learned something today that could help you on your health journey or others, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to take the next step, don't forget you can schedule a free 30-minute consultation with a naturopathic doctor to explore your health goals and get personalized guidance. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep taking steps toward better health.